Hello learners, and welcome to today's lesson of the Mathematics Paper 1 exam guide, where in today's lesson we are going to look at some questions and where those marks are allocated. So let's begin with our lesson. Well, firstly, we are going to look at the examination writing skills that you need for each exam, of course, in order for you to perform that exam successfully. Then we are going to look now at each question and the weighting versus the time. So this is how each question is weighted or how many marks it's out of, and then also the time allocation that you can give yourself per question. So looking at the first question there, that is a plus minus 25 marks, and of course you can calculate about 30 minutes for yourself to complete that question. Then we have question 2 and 3, and that of course is plus minus 25 marks as well, and you can allocate yourself there plus minus 25 minutes. Then we have question 4 right up until 6, and that is plus minus 35 marks, and that is you can allocate yourself around 40 minutes for those questions. Then we have question 7, which is around 15 marks, and we can give ourselves there 15 minutes for those questions. Then we have question 8 and 9, which is plus minus 35 marks, and that you can give yourself around 40 minutes for those questions. And then question 10 lastly would be the 15 marks, and that is plus minus 10 minutes. Now remember, the topics can differ per exam paper. So you remember that question 1 is our solve for x, question 2 and 3 is those number patterns, question 4 right up until 6 are the functions, graphs and inverses. Then we have question 7 with the finance, growth and decay, and then 8 and 9 with the differential calculus, and of course probability for question 10. But again, according to the exam paper, these questions can slightly differ, or the topics can slightly differ for each question that it has been allocated here. But those are the approximate times that you can allocate yourself. And still, when we are working with this time, we can still have enough time to go back and review our work. So let's look at each example per question, or per topic rather. So now we're going to be looking at our question 1 example. So we've just taken a few questions from the exam papers just to look at where the mark allocation is. Now the first question, they say it's a solve for x question, and there we've been given x squared is smaller than or equals to 3x. Now looking at where we are going to give marks, so the first mark is going to go for the standard form. Now the standard form there is the one that we can see there. So that will be the 1 mark for the standard form. As we can see, of course, they say there that 1 mark goes to the standard form, and then another mark goes to the factors. So that is for factorizing there, and you're going to get another mark there. Now we can see that, of course, because this is inequalities, a sketch is provided, but in this particular case, the sketch is not for marks. What is for marks though will be the answer, which is a combo mark. Combo mark means it is 2 marks or nothing. So we need to have the values correct, and we also need to have the correct notation. So we need to make sure that both of those are correct so that we can get those 2 marks. And that is how the marks will be allocated there. Let's move on to the next question. Now the next question there says, given a plus 64 divided by a is equals to 16. Then we have the first sub-question there. It says solve for a. Now, as we can see, they've written down the equation there, but you start by getting marks for putting it in standard form. So there we will get the 1 mark for putting that equation in standard form, and we will get the next mark for factorizing there, or for those factors. Of course, we know that we can always write it as a minus 8 and a minus 8, which is the same as a minus 8 squared. And then lastly, we're going to get a mark for the answer because that only produces one value for a, and that is 8. Let's move on to the next question. Now we are still within the same question of 1.2, but now we have 1.2.2. It says there, so we are given the same equation. Then it says, hence, solve for x. And then they gave us 2 exponent x plus 2 exponent 6 minus x is equals to 16. Now remember, we discussed when they say hence, it means that we are going to use the answer from above, or we use what we've already calculated. So it means that what we've already calculated and this next question, they are connected. So here, let's look at where we get those marks. So we are going to get the marks for using our exponential laws. So we can see here that because we used our exponential laws, that is 1 mark there. That exponent negative x will get its own base of 2 and move to the denominator. Then we're going to get the next mark for the 2 exponent x is equals to 8. Now this comes from the previous question. That's why our question started with hence, because it comes from what we've calculated from 1.2.1. So now taking what we've noticed from 1.2.1, we can see that in the equation that was given, there was an a there and there was also an a there, which then means that our 2 exponent x is equals to 8, since as well we've already calculated that a is equals to 8. Then of course we are going to get a mark for the answer, and those are where those 3 marks are allocated. Let's move over to the next question. It says there, without using a calculator, calculate the value of, and we have the square root of. Inside the square root, there's 2 exponent 1002 plus 2 exponent 1006, and this is all divided by 17 multiplied by 2 exponent 998. So that is what we are supposed to calculate without using a calculator. Now, we need to show each and every step. Now, let's see where we're going to get those marks. So here we're going to get a mark for that common factor. So that common factor of 2 exponent 1002, that is going to award us a mark. And of course, that second factor, that is the 2 exponent 4, that is going to award us a mark as well. Then we're going to get a mark for simplifying that whole expression there. And then lastly, we're going to get a mark for the answer. And that's where all the 4 marks are. And since as well they said without a calculator, we are calculating, make sure you show all of those steps. The next one there says, solve for x and y simultaneously. So we need to solve for x and y at the same time. We have been given 2 equations there. So how are we going to, or where are the marks allocated in this type of question? Well, let's look at the marking guideline. Well, there we can see that from the 2 equations, we are going to go and get a mark for that 3rd equation. So you're going to choose either you work from the 1st equation or the 2nd equation to get that 3rd equation. In this case, we have worked with the 1st equation. So from the 1st equation, we get that 3rd equation where we've made sure that x or y is the subject of the formula. Of course, you can use the 2nd equation as well. And as long as everything is mathematically correct, you will be awarded all the marks, and the answers in the end should be the same. Then our next mark there goes to substitution. So that equation that we've just gotten, we're going to go and substitute it into that 2nd equation. Then we're going to get a mark for simplifying, that is to get rid of those brackets or to multiply those brackets out. And then we are going to write our equation in standard form. So that's where the next mark goes to, that is writing it in standard form. Then after factorizing, we are going to get 2 x values. That is going to be the next mark, and then the last mark is going to be us substituting those x values into any of the equations, and that is going to give us those y values, and those are the 6 marks as they are. Let's go over to the next question. Now the next question there says, again, determine without using a calculator the value of. So we have been given an expression there, and remember when it says without the use of a calculator, that's where we need to see how we can simplify this using those exponential laws or those surd laws, and in this case we are working with surds. So the first thing that you're going to get a mark for is rationalization. So we are going to go ahead and rationalize our expression there. So that's the mark that we are going to get there. Now after we simplify our expression, that's the next mark that we are going to get there. And after that simplification, you will see that it works out to the answer, and that is where we're going to get that last mark. So that's the 3 marks, and that's where they are going to come from. Let's move over to the next question. Now the next question there says, given the geometric sequence 1/5 plus 1/15 plus 1/45, and of course that series continues, sorry, it's a series, that series continues. The question there says, is this a convergent geometric series? Justify your answer with the necessary calculations. So the first mark there goes to us finding the value for R. So that's going to be the first mark, and any indication that this series is converging, you are going to get a mark for that as well. So the question was, is this a convergent geometric series? We need to in the end show whether it is or it's not a converging series, and that's how we answer the question fully. Moving on to the next question, still within the same series, it says they calculate the sum of the sum to infinity of the series. So using our formula, we're going to get 1 mark for substitution and another mark for the answer. And that is as simple as it is. Those are the 2 marks. Let's go over to the next question. Now the next question there says, an arithmetic and a geometric sequence are combined to form the pattern which is given by Pn, which is equals to x, 1/3, 2x, 1/9, 3x, 1/27, and that sequence continues. Now it says they determine the general term for the odd numbers of this pattern. Write down the answer in terms of x. Now looking at the odd numbers, that is the 1st, 3rd, 5th term, and of course moving forward, using our formula, we are going to substitute into the general term 4. So the first thing you need to see there is to see that the odd numbers are the ones that form the arithmetic sequence. Now using the general term for the arithmetic sequence that is found in our formula sheet, we are going to get 1 mark for substitution and the last mark for the answer. And as you can see there, we are told that writing the answer only will be full marks. So only in this particular question will you be awarded full marks for just writing the answer and not showing the steps. Moving on to the next question, we are still within the same combination sequence. It says they calculate the value of P26. Now, you are going to get your first mark for saying n is equals to 13. And the reason why n is equals to 13 is because we realize that because there's a combination of 2 sequences, then we know that the 26th term will actually be the 13th term in one of the sequences. Now, which sequence is this? This is going to be the sequence of even numbers because 26 is an even number. We're going to get a mark for the value of R. And lastly, after substitution and calculating, we're going to get a mark for the answer. The next question there, it says, if sigma notation, and we have 21 at the top, and at the bottom we have n is equals to 1, and that is Pn is equals to 33,5. Now determine the value of x. Now we are still working within that combination sequence because we are working with P. Now we are working with the sum of. Now remember, because these are 2 sequences, and from our sigma we can tell that we have the when we start at 1, we end at 21, which means we're going to have 21 terms. Now, In the first sequence, which is the arithmetic sequence, there will be sum of 11 terms, and in the second one, there will be sum of 10 terms. Together, they make those 21 terms. So we're going to get a mark each for realizing this or recognizing this. Then we're going to get a mark for the sum of the arithmetic and another mark for the sum of the geometric. After simplification, it gives us an answer of 66x plus 0.5. We're going to get a mark for that, and this is an accuracy mark, meaning it has to be those exact numbers, nothing else. And then we will get a final mark for the answer, which is x is equals to 1/2, and that is where those 6 marks come from. Let's go over to the next question for number patterns, and that is question 3. So it says there, a quadratic sequence has the following properties. The second term is 10. The first 2 terms, are equal, and term 1 plus term 2 plus term 3 is equals to 28. Now show that the general term of the sequence is Tn is equals to 5n squared minus 15n plus 16. Now remember, if we are asked to show, it means we cannot use that equation. Instead, that equation has to be our final answer. So let's look at where we get those marks there. Now, from the information that we were given, we were told, yes, that the first 2 terms are equal. So because we don't know what those terms are, that is the x and the x, and of course that our first 3 terms, they give us a value of 28, but we'll work with that later. We are also told that the second term is 10, and there you have that sequence there written out for us. Now, first mark will go to 2a is equals to the second difference, as we know how to calculate when we are calculating our quadratic sequence. Then we know that 3a plus b is equals to t2 minus t1. Even though we don't know what those 2 terms are, we know that they are equal, so if we subtract them from each other, we are going to get 0. Then we need to find c, but for us to find c, we need to find the value of x. So then we're going to use the information that we were given here. So here we're going to get a mark for saying that the third term is equals to x plus 10, and this is from us looking at that sequence that we've written out there. So looking at that there, we can see that, okay, our third term is equals to x plus 10, and that's where the answer comes from. Then we were told that term 1, 2, and 3 is equals to 28, so writing that out again will award us another mark as well. Then when we calculate this and simplify, we will see that the value of x is 6. And then now that we have the value of x, we can go ahead and substitute and find the value for c. And that is how we have shown the general term. And can you see how that general term is not for marks? Why? Because this is something that was given to you. So it's not going to count for marks. What is going to count for marks, however, are the steps that you went through so that you can get that equation. Let's look at, still looking at the same question. It says there, is 216 a term in the sequence? Justify your answer with the necessary calculations. So now we need to check if 216 is a term in the sequence. Well, we already have the general term, which is that 5n squared minus 15n plus 16 that we had to show. Then you're going to get a mark for equating this general term to that 216, because we need to check if this is a term in the sequence. Then we are going to get a mark for the standard form. And then after factorizing, you'll see that you do get 2 answers, and one of them indeed is 8. And there we have shown that indeed 216 is a term in the sequence. It is in fact the 8th term, and that is how or where those marks would be allocated. Let's quickly go to an ad break, and then we'll see you just now for the rest of our questions. Welcome back from the ad break, and let's continue with our exam guide of mathematics paper 1, where we are looking at those mark allocations for each of those questions. Let's go over to our fourth question, which is functions and graphs. So an example that we have been given here, it says, given the function p of x is equals to 1/3 to the exponent of x. Now determine the inverse of p, so that is p exponent -1, so the inverse of p in the form y is equals to, and that is for 2 marks. So where do we get those 2 marks? Well, the first mark goes for us swapping x and y, and the next mark goes for us writing the answer, and that is the inverse of p. The next one says write down the domain of the inverse of p. Now, the inverse of p, the domain, we know we are working with x values, and that is just simply going to be just 1 mark for that answer over there. Going over to the next question, well, it says there, given f of x is equals to 4 divided by x minus 1 plus 2, write down the equations of the asymptotes of f. Now, we know that this is a hyperbola, so we are going to, we are required to write down the asymptotes of f, and this is simply 1 mark for x is equals to 1, and another mark for y is equals to 2. Now be careful, we know that we have a norm of writing p is equals to and q is equals to. You will not get marks for this. The memorandum is quite clear. You get marks for x is equals to 1 and y is equals to 2, and that is it. Moving on to the next one there, it says sketch the graph of f, label all the asymptotes and indicate the intercept with the axis. Now this is 4 marks. Let's see where we get those 4 marks. So here the marking guideline says we must sketch. You're going to get 1 mark for the asymptotes. There we see they are clearly stated. So we can see the asymptotes drawn, and we can see also the values that are indicated there. Of course, another thing that you can do is write that x is equals to 1 there and write that y is equals to 2 there. Just make it clear where the asymptotes are. Then you're going to get another mark for the x-intercept. So as we can see where it crosses the x-intercept, that is at -1. So you're going to get a mark for that. And then you're going to get another mark for the y-intercept. So this is where the graph crosses the y-axis, and that is going to be a mark. And lastly, the shape of our graph. So we know from the graph, we can see this is a positive hyperbola, and that appears in the in the first and the third quadrant. And so you're going to get a mark for the shape of the hyperbola as well. Remember, part of the shape is also that that hyperbola does not touch the asymptotes. You need to know that the asymptotes cannot be touched. So that is going to be a mark for the shape as well. And those are where the 4 marks are for this question. Now, we are still within the topic of functions, and remember, functions are going to stretch across question 4, 5, and 6. Of course, these questions can vary depending on the question paper. So now, here's another function question, and this is question 6. So it says there, the sketch below shows the graph of f of x is equals to -x squared minus 6x plus 7. Now, C is the y-intercept of f, A and B are the x-intercepts of f, and there is D is a point on f. So there we have it. Let's look at the questions. The first question says, calculate the coordinates of E, the turning point of f. So where do we get the marks? Well, the first mark is going to go for method. So either you've used the first derivative is equals to 0 to calculate the turning point, or you've used the formula of x is equals to -b divided by 2a to get the x value. But whatever method you use, you're going to get a mark for that. Then you're going to get a mark for the answer that you get from using that method. And lastly, you're going to get a mark for the y value of the turning point. Since as well we were asked for the turning point, this is the x and the y value. So those are where the 3 marks you're going to get. But be aware again here in this case, if you have the answer only, you will be awarded those 4 marks. Let's look at this one here. It says determine the equation of the straight line passing through C and D. Now we are still within the same question, and when we are looking at what is required here, we are asked to find the equation of the straight line passing through C and D. Now we were told that C is the y-intercept in the information that we were given. So the coordinates for C, of course, using our formula, that is going to be the first mark that we are allocated there. Then we will have, we will be given a mark for substitution. So this is substitution into the formula for the gradient. Remember, for an equation, we do need the formula for the gradient as well. Now, the coordinates of D were given as -5 and K, and from the question above, we did calculate that K is equals to, or you would have calculated, sorry, that K is equals to 12. So we are going to use those 2 points to substitute into the formula for a gradient. And then after that, you're going to get a mark for finding the gradient. And then we are going to get the last mark for actually answering the question, and that is finding the equation for the straight line. Then the next one, still within the same question, says a tangent parallel to CD touches F at point T, at point P, determine the coordinates of P. Now, firstly, because we are told that this tangent is parallel to CD, then that means something for us. So the first mark that we are going to get here is for the first derivative, which is a -2x minus 6. The first derivative will allow us also to, because now this is a tangent that is parallel to CD. Now, this means that this tangent is going to have the same gradient as CD. So that is going to be equated to the gradient of the CD that we've calculated in the previous question, and that is that -1. So that is the second mark that we get there. Then after that, we are going to get the x value of x, which is a -5 divided by 2. And that is the next answer that we're going to get. And now, because we have the x value, we're going to need to go and find the y value, of which we're going to take it and substitute it into the original formula of f. And that is going to give us a y value of 63 divided by 4, or 15,75. Now, this is an accuracy mark. It cannot be another value. You need to make sure that you're spot on with this answer. And those are the 4 marks for that question. The next one here says, for which values of x will f of x minus 12 be greater than 0? So where are we going to get the marks here? It's just 2 marks. The marks here are going to be gotten for that -1 in the point of symmetry. And the next mark is going to be achieved there for the answer, which is how you've written it, and the answer being from -5 to a -1. Of course, there is a different way of calculating this, but as long as you have the -1 there and the full answer there, you are going to get all those marks. Again, answer only would be full marks. Let's move on to our next question, which is our finance question. So here we have a question 7, and it says there, how many years will it take for an investment to double in value if it earns interest at a rate of 8.5% per annum compounded quarterly? Now, here it is very important that you use the correct formula, otherwise you will not get those marks. Now, in this case, we are going to get 1 mark for the 2. Why are we getting a mark for the 2? Because we were told that this investment doubled in value. So if you had used x and 2x, you still would have gotten the mark, or you could have used the p and the 2p. You could have also gotten the marks as well. The next mark there goes to our interest, which is the 0,085 divided by 4, and you're going to get a mark there. But can you see how the memorandum is showing us that this needs to be in the correct formula? So if you do have these things, but they are in the incorrect formula, you're not going to get those marks. Then we get a mark for the use of the logs. And then lastly, we get a mark for the answer in years, because our question does say how many years. So you need to make sure that our answer there is given in years. Then the next question there says, a company purchased machinery for 500,000. After 5 years, the machinery was sold for 180,000 and a new machinery was bought. The rate of inflation for the cost of the new machinery is 6.3% per annum over the 5 years. What will be the new machinery cost at the end of the 5 years? So now we need to know that this machinery that we bought for 500,000, how much will it cost in 5 years' time? We have been given the inflation rate. Now, where do we get the marks? Well, we're going to substitute into the correct formula. Can you see how using the correct formula here is important? There it is stressed again. So substitution into the correct formula, and then of course we have our answer there. But these formulas are there in the formula sheet. Your job is to know which formula to use when. Then we have the next question that says, a company set up a sinking fund and made the first payment into this fund on the day the old machinery was bought. The last payment was made 3 months before the new machinery was purchased at the end of the 5 years. The interest earned on the sinking fund was 10.25% per annum, compounded monthly. The money from the sinking fund and the 180,000 from the sale of the old machinery was used to pay for the new machinery. Now calculate the monthly payment into the sinking fund. So this is where the interpretation of these questions comes in. You need to understand what is going on in order for you to answer that question. Let's look at where we're going to get those marks. Well, firstly, it's going to be the value of the sinking fund, and that is what the machinery is going to cost minus the amount that they are going to sell the old machinery at, and that is going to be 1 mark, the 498,635 rands and 11 cents. Then we're going to get a mark for the interest, which is that 10.25% compounded monthly. We're going to get a mark for the 58, and that is an accuracy mark, because when you read the statement, it will tell you exactly how we got to that 58. So that is going to be a mark there. And then we're going to get a mark for that interest, that extra interest, because there they spoke about that 3 months before. So that is going to get a mark on its own. And then officially, you're going to get a mark for the answer. Again, that is also an accuracy mark. So it has to be exactly that answer. Otherwise, you are not going to get those marks. Let's move on to that differential calculus and see where we can get those marks there. So looking again at differential calculus, here it is a question 7 in a different paper. Remember, we spoke about those questions being slightly different. So here we are asked to determine f prime x from first principles if f of x is 2x squared minus 1. Now, how are we going to, or where are we going to get those marks? Well, the first mark is going to be there for the f of x plus h. And that is going to be the first mark. When we simplify that by saying f of x plus h minus f of x, we're going to get a mark for that simplification. And then we're going to get a mark for substituting our values into that formula. And that formula is there in the formula sheet. Please use it. And then we're going to get a mark for simplifying, and that is through factorizing there. And then the last mark is going to be for the answer. Now remember, this is the question where we penalize for notation. Now, how are we going to penalize for notation? You just need to make sure that you've written everything correctly. Make sure that your f prime is written as f prime. Make sure that your limit h approaching 0 is written right down to the end. Make sure you do not leave those equal signs out. So those are the things that can make us now penalize that mark for notation. So just make sure that everything is there. Now, moving on to a derivative question, we are given here, or we are required to find the derivative in that for that statement that we have been given there. So the first mark that we are going to get is from now removing that surd. And remember, when we remove the surd, we have to remove it correctly using our surd laws, but that is the first mark there. Then the next mark is going to be for us to do the derivative. So now that we've removed the surd, we can do the derivative. And from the first term there, that is the answer for the derivative, and we're going to get a mark for that. And then from the second term, that is the answer for the derivative there, and we're going to get a mark for that as well. So those are the 3 marks. Moving on to the next one, it's also requiring us to find the derivative. So here we've been given f of x, and the first thing we're going to get a mark for is for factorizing. So here you had to see that you need to factorize both the numerator and the denominator. Now after factorizing, you would have seen that of course we can divide things that are the same there, or we can cancel out, leaving us with a simplification of those two separate terms, and that is what we have there. And then after that, we are going to get a mark, that is the simplification of the two separate terms. And after that, we're going to get a mark for our answer, because after we've simplified everything and simplified into those two separate terms, then we can do the derivative that is asked for, and the answer there is going to be that 1. Let's move on to the next question, which is a calculus question, a cubic graph question. Now here we've been given the graph of g of x, and as you can see, the values are not given there. But what we do need to notice there is that the y-intercept is 0. And as we can see from the graph, the y-intercept is 0. But again, we can see from our formula that we do not have the value of d. So we can see there that the y-intercept is 0. Well, we are told that the x coordinates of the turning points are -1 and 2, and as those are the things that we are shown in our sketch as well. So let's see what this question asks for. Well, firstly, we need to write down the x coordinate of the point of inflection, and of course you're going to be given 1 mark for your method here. In this case, we took the x values of the turning points, we added them and divided them by 2, because that is a method of getting the point of inflection. Then we are going to get a mark for the answer as well. And then here you would have gotten 2 marks, or both of the marks, had you written the answer only. Then we are asked, for which values of x will g be concave down? So we are talking about g concave down. That is going to be from the point of inflection right up until infinity. And that is presented by saying x is greater than 1/2. So the next question there asks us, if g prime x, which is the first derivative of g, is equals to -6x squared plus 6x plus 12, then determine the equation of g. Well, here we are going to get marks firstly for doing the derivative of g. So remember, initially we were given g, it's just that we did not have values to it. We had variables only. So getting the derivative, we are going to get 1 mark there. And of course, equating it with the derivative that we already have, we would have seen that we can equate the 3a to this -6, we can equate the 2b to the 6, and of course the c to the 12. In that way, a would be equals to -2, which is the answer, b would be equals to 3, which is the answer, and c would be equals to 12. But then that is not for marks, as you can see from our memorandum. What is for marks, though, is us writing down that equation of g, since as well that was the question in the first place, to determine the equation of g. Now, looking at the next question, it says, determine the equation of the tangent of g that has the maximum gradient. Now write down your answer in the form y is equals to mx plus c. Now we are talking about the tangent to g that has the maximum gradient, and when we think about the maximum gradient of g, that of course is the turning point of the parabola, and that was at the point of inflection, which was the x is equals to 1/2. So us just substituting that 1/2 into the equation of g prime x, and that is going to be 1 mark for that substitution there, and then another mark for the actual gradient. Then we have a mark for finding the y value after we've taken that x value of 1/2 to find the y value so that we can have a point. Then after we have a point and a gradient, we are going to substitute them in, and that is 1 mark. And of course, we are going to have the final mark for our answer right there. Let's go over to the real life application for our calculus, and there we are given a diagram that represents a printed poster, and we are given information there based on the diagram. The information that we are given there is that the area of ABCD is 342 centimeters squared. We are also told that AD is equals to X. So there's AD there equals to X. And of course, we are told that ABCD is 4 centimeters from the left and right of the edges of the paper and 3 centimeters from the top and the bottom of the edges of the paper. The question asked here says, show that the total area of the page is given by. And then there we need to show, so this needs to be our answer. And because the dimensions of the paper are not given, but we can figure them out from the information given, you could have seen that for the length of the paper, that's X plus 8, and for the breadth of the paper, that is 432 divided by X, that is plus 6. Now that breadth of the paper, well, the length was given, it was told that it's X, but the breadth of the paper is actually something that is for marks here. That is the first mark for saying that the area of the paper is equals to the length times breadth, and if we make the breadth the subject of the formula, that is where the 1 mark starts. Then the length of the paper is going to be 1 mark, and the breadth of the paper is going to be another mark. And if we work that out, we will see that the area of the paper is equals to what we were given after we multiply those brackets out. The next one here says, determine the value of X such that the total area of the page is a minimum. Now we know when we're working with minimum, we are working with derivative. But looking at how our formula for the area was presented, we first need to make sure that in the denominators, there are no variables. So you're going to get 1 mark for actually rearranging our equation there so that our variable is removed from being a denominator. And then you're going to get another mark for finding the actual derivative, because we know that if we are calculating something that's a minimum, that is the first derivative is equals to 0. And if we do equate that derivative to 0, we will get an answer of 24 centimeters. And that is where the third mark goes. Let's go over to the last topic of paper 1, and that is probability. And in this case, we have been given a Venn diagram, and we are told this Venn diagram actually has information except for X and Y. So let's look at the questions there. Well, it says there, if it is given that the probability that at least one of the events will occur is 0,893, then calculate the value of Y. Now, if we look at where Y is outside. It has nothing to do with the events that are occurring. So how do we calculate that Y? We're simply going to say Y is equals to 1, which is everything, minus the at least one event occurring, and that's going to give us the value for Y. And that is simply that 1 mark there. Then the next question says, X, we're going to calculate X, the probability that all 3 events occur. So how are we going to calculate this? Well, we're going to take the probability of at least one of the events occurring, and we're going to subtract them by the addition of all the probabilities there. So this is these ones. So when we go ahead and we add these ones here, that is where that 0,733 comes from, and we will get an answer of 0,16. Then next, we are asked to calculate to determine the probability that at least 2 of the events will take place. And we can see there that as we are writing it, it's the probability of at least 2 events. So we are going to take all of the events that are 2 or more. So these are all of them that appear, the 2 of them, plus the 1 where it's 3 of them. And when we add all of these up, we get an answer of 0,61. Now, had you written the answer only, you will get full marks, but just adding those values and writing the answer will also award you those 2 marks. Then the question there says, are events B and C independent? Justify your answer. So for us to be able to calculate whether they're independent or not, there needs to be a formula in your mind. There is something that you need to prove. So you're going to get a mark for finding the probability of B alone, finding the probability of C alone, then finding the probability of B and C, right? So that one would be in the diagram, of course. And then you're going to multiply the probability of B times C to get an answer for that, and you're going to get a mark for that as well. And then lastly, you're going to get a mark for the conclusion, for saying that yes, they are independent. And why are they independent? It's because of that calculation that you just did there to show that the probability of B and C will be equals to the probability of B multiplied by C. And that's where the 5 marks are going to be. Let's look at our final question. And there it's a counting principle question, and it says there a 4-digit code is required to open a combination lock. The code must be even numbered and may not contain the digit 0 or 1. Digits may not be repeated. How many possible 4-digit combinations are there to open the lock? So here you're going to get a mark for those 4 digits because it did say a 4-digit code. So you're going to get a mark for the 4 there, and then you're going to get a mark for 7 because we know that the numbers that we have, or the codes that we have, they're going to be 7 of them based on the information that we have been given here. So we're going to get a mark also for multiplying all of these numbers here, and then that is going to give us an answer of the 840. And then lastly, we are asked, calculate the probability that you will open the lock at the first attempt if it is given that the code is greater than 5,000 and the 3rd digit is 2. Now this is where that interpretation has to come in. So you have to sit down, think about it. What is the code going to look like? And we can see here that there are 3 possible combinations. So it's either there is going to be the code that starts with a 5, a 7, or a 9. So that's going to be a mark. There's either going to be a code that starts with a 6. That's going to be a mark. And of course, a code that starts with an 8. That's going to be a mark. So that's going to ensure that the code is greater than 5,000, and also making sure that it is the 3rd digit is a 2. And of course, not forgetting that it needs to be an even number as well, because they said there that the code must be even numbered. So taking all of that into account, then we're going to add all of those possibilities up, and it gives us 65 of the different combinations. But now the question was, calculate the probability that you will open it in the first attempt. So you're going to take those 65 attempts and you're going to divide them by the total codes of 840. So the 65 codes, that has those specific specifications, we're going to divide them by the total number of codes that can be created from these digits. And that, of course, is going to give us an answer of 0.08, or 13 divided by 168. And that is where you are going to get those 5 marks. Let's quickly go to an ad break, and then we'll see you just now. Welcome back from the ad break, and let's continue with that exam guide for Mathematics Paper 1. But now we are just going to end our lesson with those final thoughts. So these are things that you can keep in mind when you are sitting in the exam room. So the first one there, it says use the reading time provided. Please use that reading time provided so that you can just familiarize and remind yourself of that content. Don't provide 2 solutions. Make your choice clear. Remember, if there are two solutions, we only mark the first one and ignore the second one. Get enough rest the day before the exam. Please do not study the whole night. You need the rest. It's a 3-hour paper, so you need to be bright and sharp for that paper. So make sure you get enough rest. And lastly, relax and believe in yourself. Trust me, you've got this. Thank you for joining us for this exam guideline for Mathematics Paper 1, and we hope to see you next time. Goodbye.